Hi guys, today we are learning how to simplify fractions. Let's first review how to find equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are fractions appearing or looking different, but having the same value. For example, 1/2 is equal to 4/8. We could multiply both our numerator and denominator by 4 to get our equivalent fraction 4/8. To make a smaller equivalent fraction, you can divide the fraction by a fraction equal to 1. When we do this, the numbers we're dividing by must be made up of numbers that are common factors of both the numerator and the denominator. So if we look at the fraction 8/16 as an example, first we must look at the numerator and denominator and see if they have any common factors. To do this, we will list out all of the factors of 8 and 16. The factors of 8 are already listed out for us. We can multiply 1 times 8 to get to 8 and 2 times 4 to equal 8. The factors of 16, we know we can multiply 1 times 16 to equal 16. 2 times 8 is 16. And 4 times 4 is 16. We only need to write the 4 one time. Next, we'll look for any common factors between our two numbers. So I see that 1 is a common factor, 2 is a common factor, 4 is a common factor, and 8 is a common factor. So I can rewrite those down below. 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now that we know the common factors of 8 and 16, we can make fractions equal to 1 and create smaller equivalent fractions. In example number 1, 2 is a common factor of both 8 and 16. So we divided both our numerator and denominator by 2 to get an equivalent fraction of 4/8. In example number 2, another common factor of both 8 and 16 is 4. So when we divide both our numerator and denominator by 4, 8 divided by 4 is 2. and 16 divided by 4 is 4. So 2/4 is an equivalent fraction to 8/16. In the last example, we have our equivalent fraction 1/2, and we need to determine what we divided both our numerator and denominator by. In order to get from 8 to 1, I would have divided by 8. And to get from 16 to 2, we could divide by 8. 8 is a common factor of both 8 and 16. And our equivalent fraction is 1/2. Now let's create a smaller fraction that's equivalent to 2/8. I know that a common factor of 2 and 8 is 2. So if we divide both our numerator and denominator by 2, we will get a smaller equivalent fraction. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 1/4 is equivalent to 2/8. Now we'll learn how to simplify fractions. A fraction in its simplest form is a fraction whose numerator and denominator do not have any common factors other than 1. When we put a fraction in simplest form, we call it simplifying the fraction or reducing a fraction. This is the same thing. In order to put a fraction in simplest form, we must divide it by its greatest common factor. Or GCF. If we use the fraction from above, 8/16, to put in simplest form, we will begin by finding the greatest common factor. Let's look at all the factors again and circle all of the common ones that we see. So I see 1 is a common factor, 2 is a common factor, 4 is a common factor, and 8 is a common factor. Those are all of our common factors between 8 and 16. I see that 8 is the largest common factor between both numbers, so it is the greatest common factor. If we divide both the numerator and denominator of 8/16 by 8, we will get a fraction of 1/2. This fraction is in the simplest form. Let's try some guided practice problems together. Let's look at the fractions below and circle any fractions that are not in their simplest form. I see 1/2. That fraction is in its simplest form because there are no common factors between 1 and 2. 2/4 is not in its simplest form. 6/12 is not in its simplest form. 1/4 is in its simplest form because there are no common factors between 1 and 4. Whenever you see a 1 in the numerator, you know that that fraction is in its simplest form and cannot be broken down any further. 2/3 is in its simplest form because there are no common factors between 2 and 3. Next, we see 12/36. This fraction is not in its simplest form. And 7/21 is also not in its simplest form. We know how to make smaller equivalent fractions and how to put them in simplest form. So let's look at the fractions that we circled and put them all in their simplest form. First, we'll look at the fraction 2/4. First, we'll list all of the factors of 2 and 4. The factors of 2 are 1 times 2 equals 2. And the factors of 4 are 1 times 4 equals 4, and 2 times 2 equals 4. Next, we'll look for any common factors. 1 is a common factor, and 2 is a common factor. 2 would be our greatest common factor. If we divide both our numerator and our denominator by 2, the fraction will be in its simplest form. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2/4, written as a fraction in its simplest form, is 1/2. Next, we'll look at the fraction 6/12. First, we'll list all of the factors of 6 and 12. 1 times 6 is 6, and 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 6 is 12. And 3 times 4 is 12. Next, we'll circle all of the common factors that we see. 1 is a common factor. 2 is a common factor. 3 is a common factor. And 6 is a common factor. So 6 would be our greatest common factor. If we divide both our numerator and our denominator by 6, the fraction will be in its simplest form. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 12 divided by 6 is 2. So 6/12, written as a fraction in its simplest form, is 1/2. Next, we'll simplify the fraction 12/36. First, we will list all of the factors of both 12 and 36. 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 6 is 12. And 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 36 is 36. 2 times 18 is 36. 3 times 12 is 36. 4 times 9 is 36. And 6 times 6 is 36. Next, we will circle all of the common factors between both numbers. 1 is a common factor. 2 is a common factor. 3 is a common factor. 4 is a common factor. 6 is a common factor. And 12 is a common factor. So 12 is our greatest common factor. If we divide both the numerator and denominator by 12, the fraction will be in its simplest form. 12 divided by 12 is 1. 36 divided by 12 is 3. So 12/36, written as a fraction in its simplest form, is 1/3. The last fraction we will simplify is 7/21. First, we will list all of the factors of 7 and 21. 1 times 7 is 7. 7 is a prime number, so its only factors are 1 and itself. 1 times 21 is 21. 3 times 7 is 21. Now we will circle all of the common factors between both numbers. 1 is a common factor, and 7 is a common factor. So our greatest common factor is 7. If we divide both the numerator and denominator by 7, our fraction will be in its simplest form. 7 divided by 7 is 1, and 21 divided by 7 is 3. So 7/21 in its simplest form is 1/3. Now you will complete an independent practice pizzazz on your own. We will solve the first question together. For each question, there are 3 fractions that we need to write in its lowest terms or its simplest form. After we solve for the fractions in lowest terms, there will be one extra answer. We will write the letter of this answer in the corresponding box at the bottom of the page. We can divide both 6 and 9 by 3. And when we do, we reduce our fraction to 2/3. 2/3 is in its simplest form. We can divide both 2 and 10 by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. The fraction 1/5 is now in its simplest form. We can divide 20 and 35 by 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4, and 35 divided by 5 is 7. 4/7 is in its simplest form. Now we will look for the extra answer that we did not find. 2/7 is our extra answer, for this question. So we will place the letter E down below in the box for number 1. You will complete the rest of the problems on your own and solve for the answer to the riddle.